Hi folks, well it's heating season again, so it's time to get the wood stoves ready to go. I've already cleaned the chimney and the pipes, but now what I want to do is I want to do some maintenance on the stove itself, and what I've done is I've taken the door off my wood stove. This is cast iron, heavy steel, and of course tempered glass. Now what I'm going to do here, and I'll show you how to do this, it's not a difficult job, but if you've never done it before, maybe I can help you out a little bit with it. This is the seal, the gasket seal that goes around the door, and that's what makes the door tight when it's against the face of the wood stove, so that no air can get in. That way you're controlling your burn. You want to just be able to use your damper, how much air you let in, so how quickly or slowly the stove burns. But without this, you're just touching metal on metal, so the seal wouldn't be good. And of course, even over time, so there could be some warping going on with the front plates of the stove, hopefully not the door, but this does need to be changed every few years, so that's what I'm going to do now. I think this is about the third one I've had on here over the course of the years of having this wood stove. So we'll walk you through that here. As I said, it's not a difficult job. If you've never done it, this is to help. Now, what I've done is I just went to Tractor Supply and got a kit. This has a gasket in it and also the glue that you need. Now there were three different sizes at Tractor Supply for the stove: 3/8, ½ inch, and 5/8 diameter for the rope the gasket rope. I'm pretty sure this is ½ inch. I tried to measure like here to here, the inside diameter of the channel. I'm pretty sure that's going to fit. You forget, if you only do this every so many years, you forget exactly what you need to do. So I think the ½ inch is what I want. And this was about $12, $13 at my local Tractor Supply. So, and we'll walk you through using that. So that's the main thing you need. Also, to pry out, you've got to pry out all the old gasket that was in there. I'm just using screwdrivers to do that. Hopefully it won't be that difficult to get out. By this time the glue should be sort of hardened and should just kind of break out rather than being too gummy. But you also have to clean the channel down to the bare metal. You want to get all the old residue out, all the old residue gasket, and also any glue that might still be in there, so that the new glue will adhere well. You want it to stick. You don't want your gasket coming apart when you open the stove door, because obviously when it's hot you're not going to be doing any repairs. So after I get that out, I'm going to go over the inside of the channel with some wire brushes just to try to get as much out as I can. I also have a scissors to cut my rope gasket to size, because this is a 7-foot length that it comes, and it's designed for different size stoves, of course, so I don't think I'll need all 7 feet for that, of course, so I'll cut it to size and I'll show you that. And then there's one other little thing that I'm including, and that's a spray bottle. They're suggesting that what you do is you spray, you moisten or spray lightly the inside of the channel first, and then you dampen the new rope gasket before you put it in place. That's supposed to help with adherence, I guess. So the easiest way is to just use a squirt bottle on that. So that's what I'm going to be using. At any rate, the door came off fairly easy. It's just on pegs that slip over the face of the stove. It's still in good shape, even though this stove is probably 10 years old. There is a gasket around the window. It still looks like it's sealed, so I'm not worried about that. That's held in place. As you can see here, there are 4 screws that hold these 2 metal brackets to hold it in place, and then the glass itself. So I think that's still sealed, and if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know what I mean? It's still okay. It's still doing the job, so I'm not going to worry about that. But I definitely have to change this out. This has become pretty hard right here, and if you look up in there, that's actually sunk in a little beyond flush. So there is an air gap there, and I did notice that there was extra air getting into the stove. Even if I choke it down, it still wanted to burn a little faster than I wanted. So this is why, because that just recessed in too far, just kind of degraded over the last few years. So what you want is a good seal, something that's going to stick up enough that it will touch the face of the stove all the way around, but not so much that you can't close the door tight, you know. So that's the other reason why you have to have the right diameter gaskets. If you get some that are too narrow, they won't do the job in the channel. If you get some that are too big, they might bulge out too much, might even come out. So at any rate, I'm going to get started here with just taking this gasket out. Again, I don't know how hard or easy this is going to be, and I am going to put my gloves on too, so I don't know what kind of things I'm going to be dealing with there, so just to protect my hands and if there's anything else to have to worry about there. So we're going to do this. I probably won't show you do the whole thing, but I'll show you starting it because it'll get boring to watch the whole thing. As you can see, it's coming out in pieces, but it is coming out. If you look here, you can see there's a little bit of residue in there, but more, by and large the gasket came out in one piece, which, I mean, it didn't just splinter into, it didn't crumble is what I'm trying to say. That's not maybe the case all the way through because it is old, but it isn't difficult to get out. The adhesive isn't holding me back. So as you can see, probably going to have to get a dust brush too to work through this to get rid of the excess powdery residue from the old gasket. But it is coming out fairly easily, as I anticipated it would. I think it almost looks to me like I did a repair on this because some of the gasket isn't as old as other parts of it. So I'm thinking if maybe last year I just took out the parts that were the worst and left the rest of the gasket in. That's possible. Although I'd probably recommend, if you're going to do it, just do the whole thing. That way your wear will be even and you won't have to keep piecing it. As I said, I don't have to do this every year. Now, we burn this wood stove from October to May, depending on the temperature. And in the wintertime, it's burning very hot. And once we get to the winter months, it's burning 24/7. We don't let it burn out or anything because it's one of our primary heating sources. So it does get heavy use, and yet these gaskets do the job. And this wood stove, even this is just I forget the brand right now. It's 2,500 square feet. It's I got a Tractor Supply maybe 10 years ago. I wasn't looking for one of these really fancy, you know, enameled colored decorative brass trimmed ones, you know, that cost you thousands of dollars. More power to you if you have one of those or want one of those, but it wasn't necessary for me. It's just matte black metal in the living room. I mean, it's not attractive, but it's not ugly either. It's an old farmhouse. What would you want, you know? So, as you can see, this is coming out fairly simply. And again, I want to thank everybody, by the way, for subscribing. Those of you who have, that we've reached, now we're over 1,000 subscribers. That's a huge milestone for me on this channel, so thank all of you who watch my videos, and I hope I've been able to be helpful with a number of things and maybe confirm things you are doing or show you that you're doing things better than I am. Because I'm not an expert on anything. I'm just trying to make our way here, living out in the country without being rich and having to afford all the niceties of life. So at any rate, yes, we are at the point where it's burning season. In fact, last night we had our very first frost. So that's the end of my garden for another year, except for the cold crops. I have some late broccoli and late cabbage planted. I don't know if they'll mount to anything, but they're frost resistant, so I probably have a few more weeks of growth out of them before I see what I get. But yeah, everything else now is done for. But I had almost everything out. There were some small green tomatoes left, but almost everything out we were pretty much finished with, so it wasn't a bad growing year. I'm going to pause the video here, and I'm going to get a dust brush and clean the excess out, and I'll come back and show you using the wire brush a little bit. Okay, I'm back. As you can see, most of the residue came out just with the dust brush, but I do want to go over this with the wire brush well, so that I'm sure I'm getting all the residue out of there, so that the adhesive will stick right. Last thing I want is to have to try to do this, a repair on this or a replacement on this, like in January when I need to be running the stove 24/7. There's a little bit of rust in there, but nothing major. I mean, it's cast iron, it's going to rust a little bit. I probably should have repainted the stove. Usually I'll spray paint the stove every couple years because it tends to want to get a little rough looking from burning. They do make a high temperature spray paint for stoves or other things like that. It's even a higher temperature than engine enamel, the kind that they use to spray paint car engines. I forget what it costs. It just comes in an aerosol can, but it does do a good job. You just have to realize that when you use it and then put a fire in for the first few times, you're going to have a smell as the paint cures. So don't let that push you off, but just realize that's going to happen if you're going to paint your stove. You're going to have to deal with that. So, at any rate, all right. So, okay, we are all cleaned out. We're ready to go, and I pulled the rope gasket out of the container. And so what we're going to do first is we're going to dry fit it and then cut it to size, and then we'll dry fit it again. Now, just a word of caution, when you go to cut this, err on the side of too big, because if you cut it and it's like a 1/4 inch too short, then you've got a gap, and then there's no way you're going to have a good seal that way, you know, even if you try to piece it in. So what I would suggest is, and see how these ends are frayed? I don't know if I can do much with that. Let me see if I can cut some of that off or not. Yeah, a little bit, but there's still going to be some of that you can't really do much about. There. Try it that way. As I said, this is 7 feet. It's more than I need, but that's okay. Now what I'm going to do here too, I'm probably going to make my joint, my splice joint, in the middle of the door rather than in one of the corners. That way I'm sure that I'm solid through my corners. There's no real way you have to do that, but that's just a preference that I have. So I will probably just go like this. As you can see, I'll pull it that way a little more. As you can see, it tucks down in there nicely. So it will again when we have the glue in. You're going to tuck it down in there just to get a feel for it. And as you see, I did guess right that the 1/2 inch was what I wanted. I didn't want the 5/8. And just keep working it around like that. This gasket is kind of, it's not round, it's more oblong, so it does have short sides and long sides. So I'm taking the short side and sticking it down in so that the long side can stick up. I think I'll get a better seal that way if I do it that way. And just keep working it around in there like that. I'm hoping this is showing up okay on video. And you don't have very good equipment to work with. You're always guessing as to what your results are going to be. As I'm sure some of you who've seen many of my videos over the course of the years can attest. I still have the same camera that I've been using all those years, but at any rate, maybe someday I'll get some better equipment. But for right now, this does the trick. Now I'm right here, to where my other side ended. You can see I've got a long tail, so I'm going to cut it just a little bit up, just to be sure. Okay, and then I can always just kind of squeeze it. I'd almost rather squeeze it in so I'm sure I have a good seal. Don't want it to bulge anywhere, so you can't cut it too long, but if it's just a little bit longer than the actual length, you can still squeeze it down into the channel. I'm not even worried about using like a screwdriver or anything to put it down. It fits down in nicely. It feels like it's against the bottom of the channel, so I'm good there. Okay, so now we've got to cut to size. Now what we have to do is we have to deal with glue and moisture and then put it back together. So let me come back, I'll get the glue open, I'll show you what we're going to do with that. Alright, now before I open the glue, they suggest that you dampen both the gasket and the gasket channel, so that's where the spray bottle comes in. I don't want to make it too wet because then I have a lot of excess water dripping all over the place, but it's got to be damp so that it seats properly. So I'm just going to basically do this. And I'll flip the gasket over so I'm getting both sides. I don't know exactly how damp it needs to be, but just I'll err on the side of caution a little bit. So that should be pretty much damp all the way around now. And then I'll just do the same thing here, just a little bit. Don't want puddles of water in the channel. Okay, so now it suggests that you do an 1/8 inch bead of adhesive in the bottom of the channel. So I've got to cut this. There are markings on here. You could have bigger or smaller depending what you want, and I'm going to control that by hand pressure when I'm squeezing. I don't want too many big blobs or anything, but I've got to get enough in there so that it will do the trick. I think that's close to 1/8 of an inch. So let's give this a try. I'm not good at doing this. I hate caulking. And it did say to knead the tube before opening, which I did. I don't know if that's closed in and needs a pin to open it. It must be. I didn't realize that. Alright, I've got to come back to you. I've got to get a little wire and poke a hole. Probably just take a paper clip. Somehow it's skinned off in there, so which is usually the way caulk is. So I'll be... Alright, so I just poked a hole in that. Now I should be good here. I don't know why this doesn't want to come out. Let's try it here closer. I'm not understanding that because there's a hole in here. You can see the black. Maybe it's just, maybe I have to cut a bigger opening. I'm afraid that's what I have to do. Yeah, it really doesn't want to come out very easily. Maybe it's just old. And there it's starting to, but that's not the consistency I want it to be. I just have to cut a bigger hole, I guess. I hope that works. Yeah, let's try this. Boy, this is not working the way previous adhesive I've used has worked. It really does not want to come out at all. So I have to take my pocket knife and cut this on an angle like I would normally do with other caulk, but we'll see if that's going to solve my problem. But I know the previous adhesives I've used on here, it wasn't so difficult to get them out of the container, out of the tube. There, now I've cut it on a slight angle. See if that helps us. It still doesn't want to come out very well. There we go, finally. Okay, we'll see if I can't get a consistent bead going through here now. Well, I certainly didn't need that big of a blob. Okay, in my reviews for Tractor Supply, I'm going to have to tell them that this adhesive really does suck. Shouldn't be this difficult to apply. I'm still getting way too much. Well, I'm going to have to spread it around, I guess. Certainly not getting a nice bead, but as long as I get the volume in there, I can get the gasket on it. So. I would imagine if I had a bigger job here, I'd just use a regular tube, caulk tube size with a caulk gun, and then the application would be a bit easier and more uniform. But since it's just this one door, and this is the amount that came in the kit, I don't need any more. But we'll make it work. The important thing is that you don't have any gaps in the caulk, so that there's a place where the gasket could come loose. Okay, let's see, make sure I'm covered here everywhere. isn't any left over, that's for sure. Of course, I'm applying it a whole lot thicker than it should be, but I still think a little too much is better than not enough in a case like this. Alright. So, I'll just smooth this down a little bit with my screwdriver. Because way too much in some places, I realize that. And even if I have to take some out, I will. Just want to make sure you don't get any glue on the face of the inside of this door, that you'd have metal on metal and you'll end up gluing your stove door shut, which you don't want, obviously. So as long as I can keep it in the channel, it should be alright. Okay. So now, what we want to do is, I think I'm going to put my gloves on just in case, because I really don't want any of that glue all over my fingers, because I don't know how toxic or hazardous it may be, caustic, you know what I mean. So if I can do this with my gloves on, I will. If not, I'll have to take them off. Yeah, I can see already I can't work like that. Alright, we'll survive. So we take our gasket, stick it back down in there like we had it. Just push it down in. Now remember, it's not going to go in quite as easy because you've got some glue down in there now that we didn't have before. But you still should be able to get it down in enough that it will ride in the channel pretty well. And once it's glued in place, I don't have to worry about it going anywhere. Oop. Just putting enough pressure to get it down in there. I know I'm going to have some glue that's going to come out where I don't want it to be because I put way too much on here. Deal with that when we get to the end here. And remember, this is still damp, which is what I want. I think we're good there. Just want to make sure it's going to stay in place. I think we're good. Now, what I need to do next is I need to actually take this in, put it back on the stove. I'm going to try to wipe any little excess glue that's here off first, around the outside. Put it on the stove and push it in, get the seal. Then the next thing they say is unseal it, open the stove door again and let it hang open and let it air dry for at least an hour. Now, to cure the glue, you have to make a fire, it says according to instructions, within 30 days. So it has to be, you have to put a fire in the stove within a month after doing this. Obviously I'm going to do it tonight, so that won't be a problem with that. And then that should cure it, that it's not going to go anywhere, and get a good tight seal, and I won't have to worry anymore about unwanted air getting into the stove. Let's see how this works. A little bit of excess glue here and there that I don't want. But given the trouble that darn tube gave me, I'm surprised I don't have a bigger mess. But we got it all in, and the gasket's in place. That's what's important. So I will come back to you with the wrap-up, but that's basically the resealing or the re-gasketing of our wood stove door. All right, I'll come back to you. Okay, there we go. I've already tried this once, but I'll show you again. Feels like it's a good seal. I don't hear any metal clinking anywhere. And when I pull it back out, the gasket's still in place, which is what I want, of course. So we will let it dry. So thank you for watching. Thank you for liking, subscribing, sharing the videos with others. And again, thank you so much for supporting our channel as we live life out in the country on a shoestring.